When I first started in 1989, I taught where Pam is now, but it was a bare room and there was no carpeting and there were no props, no costumes, no storage space, no stage, no lighting. It was a room with some windows in a basement. And I was a new teacher. I had some experience teaching drama and I also had some experience doing curriculum for drama. But basically the first couple of years it was me trying, experimenting, seeing where the students were, getting a real sense of who the students were and what they could do, what they knew, and then writing short plays with them, doing a lot of collaborative creation to create things that they really felt that they owned, and then putting things on for concerts. So short 15-minute, 20-minute productions that had maybe a vocal music piece first, some Orff instruments, a little Orff piece, and then maybe a 20-minute play, ending with a couple of songs at the end from the vocal people that sort of tied it all together. As time went on, by the time I got to 93, the students were really ready. We'd had a drama club for several years to put on a first full-length production. There were two computers at Montcrest School. One was Mrs. Jansen's, and one was in a room where Mr. Thompson is now. And I would go there every night after school, and I would write, I wrote the first play that I ever did here called The Legend of Robin Hood, and it was published later in the States. So a lot of schools here in Canada and in the States do it. And it's a great play for kind of grade 4 to grade 8. Now, for Montcrest students, that play would be too easy. And it wasn't long enough, and it was much too easy in terms of the themes and in terms of how it was blocked. So later on, I wrote Robin's Hood, and I've written Robin's Hood twice. So every time we had a group of students who had this skill level, and it raised to here, I then had to raise the level of the content for drama productions up to where the students were. And I found over time my writing got better, the students got better because it was a really good curriculum in class, but also so many people wanted to be in the Montcrest Players. Back in '94, we did our first musical because I wrote a play with Miss A.K. Dion did the music, and that play had 68 students in it. It had choirs of singers, it had a big ship, the whole bit, and it was pretty incredible. We pulled off, and people were trapped in a very small room at the church with Mr. Nix. So, and my husband, who was a parent volunteer for years, basically borrowed lighting that he should not have borrowed, and we used things from borrowed props, borrowed sets from movies. We did whatever we could. Over time, with Mrs. Dance's support, we had more materials. We didn't have to have Mr. Brown bring everything in his station wagon to a church anymore. There are people who did all the hard work that need the credit for that. And over time, as the plays got better, the kids got better, we got a space here in '96 at Montcrest School. Our first production here in February '97, just before my daughter, who's in grade 8, was born, was The Legend of Robin Hood, a little bumped up. And Mr. Bailey co-directed that production, and Miss Silverberg was a student teacher, and she stage managed that production. And the big concern was, would Miss Swarbrick's baby come before the play? And then Mr. Bailey would have to direct the whole thing, and Miss Silverberg would have to work the whole backstage by herself. And fortunately, Haley Mullen decided to wait, and everything was fine, and then she was born. So over time, the students and their love of drama pushed me to be better and better. And
I was studying with this wonderful woman called Mary Mumford. Mary Mumford, at that point in time in the 70s, was a fairly major teacher in Toronto. Mary had 2 children here at school, and I was studying with her, and I was the only student of hers that had afternoons, daytimes off because I was a musician, and she asked me if I would like to come and co-direct the first production of Montcrest School, which was a play, a book, but we made it into a play called The Little Prince. And that was the very first production. I believe it was 1973, and that's what brought me to Montcrest School, and we went from there to many other productions. It was wonderful because we didn't have much money, but we had a will. And theater back in those days in Toronto was very much like that because there were no big budgets to make big plays. But very often what can happen if you don't have a whole lot of money to do things, it almost forces you to become more creative and figure out a way, okay, if we can't do it this way for that amount of money. And of course, Mrs. Livingston was the vehicle that made all of this run.
So I came to Toronto hoping to do my master's, and in the meantime I got my dear friend June knew Miss Swain Glanders, who used to teach French here, and she knew that she worked here, and actually June saw in the Globe and Mail, June saw in the Globe and Mail an ad for an instrumental music teacher, and at Montcrest School, and Montcrest kind of stood out to her, and so she's like, okay, Jen, you gotta go get your resume. So I sent my resume in, and I got an interview, and it was like the best interview of my whole life. But I came trotting down Broadview, and Julian was standing, I guess, in the window. I don't know if you were.
Like, it is Miss Vincent.
I don't know if you know the bay window of Mr. Beatty's office. So they were standing there watching me come down. He's like, it is Jen Vincent. And so I'm coming to the school. I actually had toured the school way before there was a band.
Wow.
Yeah, really? So it was years and years before, and so I kind of forgot about it, which is terrible. But anyway, so it's like my stories in class, they go on forever. So anyway, I walk in the door for my interview, and I'm kind of nervous, and I've got my big, my big girl boots on, my high heels, and I open the door, and Julian Smurden picks me up and hugs me and swings me around. I'm like, wow, this is a great interview. Doesn't really get better than this. Anyway, so we all sat together. Dr. John was in my interview, and that was it. And then Nancy Steinhauer was the former assistant head. I remember standing at the door. I'm like, okay, well, bye. She's like, yay! Oh, that's really nice. So that's how I came here.
I have to say,
You got a good
fate brought me here. You know, when things are meant to be, they're meant to be. So we were moving from Winnipeg to Toronto, and all I was doing was looking for school for my children. And the principal of my daughter's school said, look for the place where Elaine Danson is. Elaine Danson, I thought. So then I went through all the directories, and I found the school. It was Montcrest School. So seeing all these wonderful teachers saying this is the most awesome school for my kids, and Elaine Danson, looks, oh, you're studying music at University of Toronto. We have a music position here. No way. And I didn't even apply for the job. It was just basically, we'll see you in September, and it's been wonderful ever since. So, okay.
I was singing in the Amadeus Choir. I was a soloist with them, and Miss Mary Gray was in Amadeus Choir with me, and she said, Karen, she said, there's a job opening up at the place that I work, and I think you'd be great for it. And I'm a mom of 5 kids, and I was an at-home mom, and I was running my own home daycare. So I said, where do you work? And she said, oh, it's a private school called Montcrest. And I said, I'm really not private school material. I don't wear high heels and stockings and stuff like that. She goes, no, that's not this kind of a place, right? I said, okay, I'll try it. So I got my interview. I applied to come in and see Miss Danson. It was a huge snowstorm in January in 1999. And I made my way. I asked my neighbor to drive me. I got here 2 hours earlier. I went to Second Cup up the street, and my phone just to make sure. And the phone kept ringing and ringing and ringing, and Miss Maxwell picked it up. I didn't know that's who it was, and she was doing admissions. I said, oh, you are open. And she says, no, we're closed. It's the first snow day we've ever had. I went, oh, I have an interview with Miss Danson. And she goes, oh, I'll give you her phone number. So I got to call Miss Danson at home, and I said, well, I was applying for a JK position to be the assistant. She went, oh, we had this great talk, and I felt like her best friend right away. Came in for my interview, sat with Mr. Kerwin, and this is what Miss Gray said. She says, you'll love the JK teacher. He's a male, it's a man, and he has hair down to here. He has long hair. I went, this sounds so cool. And then I walk in.
He did?
He did?
Well, this is right halfway down his back. Yeah.
Oh my God.
No, but wait. Okay, sorry. So I get into Fort Montcrest, come in the front door, and the first vision I see is Miss Kingstone in SK. Some of you had her in SK. And you know how cool and groovy she is? She has this really neat haircut and dangly earrings, and she was wearing platform running shoes, and I went, I so can work here. This is advisory. Had the interview with Mr. Kerwin. I spent the morning in JK, and I thought, oh, maybe the teacher changed because he has short hair. It was a male, he's a man clearly, but he had short hair, and I thought, oh, okay. So Miss Gray hadn't seen him for a little while, and he had just cut it about 3 months prior to me getting there. But we went upstairs. Miss Danson's office was in 4 Montcrest, and up where Madame Dagnot's class is. And we all sat down. She goes, well, Michael, to Mr. Curran, she says, what do you think? And he went, yeah. And that's how I got the job. And she said, Karen, we didn't talk about your salary. And I just felt like I came right out and I said, well, $1 million would be great. And she went, oh, and we had a big laugh. And she said, Michael, I think you're due for a raise. And the rest is history. So awesome. I've been here 11 years.
Yeah.
It's just
That's so
fabulous.
I actually first came to Montcrest in 1992, right after I graduated from University of Toronto, and I was looking for a place to do some supply work. And do you guys remember Ms. Maxwell? Are you guys all
Yeah.
So Ms. Maxwell met me at 4 Montcrest, and the first room she showed me was the SK room with Ms. Kingstone, and I went in and saw her fantastic hair and fantastic clothes, and loved this school right away. And Ms. Maxwell took me down to the basement. Do you remember the old music room?
Yeah.
Some of you probably don't, but it used to be very kind of dark and horrifying. And I went, oh! And it wasn't really the kind of music room I was used to teaching in, but I was very polite, and I said to Ms. Maxwell, oh, it's very nice, it's so homey, and being in the basement, it's great. And
you were lying.
I was lying. I was lying so well that Ms. Maxwell hired me to teach a couple of days that month. It was just right at the end of school. So I was in Ms. Blakely's classroom once as a supply teacher, and I was in Ms. Cathcart's room once as a supply teacher. And then I didn't come back to Montcrest until the year 2000, because I got hired in a public board and I started teaching up in Markham. But I never forgot my first introduction to Montcrest School, and especially meeting Miss Kingstone.
Awesome. Ms. Grundy? So
Yeah.
how you play, I've seen you play a couple different instruments. How many do you play?
Well, I have a similar response to Ms. Vincent here, so a little bit of everything.
Everything?
A little bit of everything and some not very well.
I assume.
Flute was my instrument in high school. I took piano lessons for a while till I quit. I studied voice all the way through, so my voice was my instrument in university. And then when I took music in university, I learned to play the clarinet and the sax and the trumpet and the baritone and the tuba. I'm not good at French horn. I never tried oboe, but I'm going to say I wouldn't be able to do that. And I'm a self-taught guitar ukulele player. Oh, and recorder. Couldn't forget
recorder. When you're in university as a music teacher, you have to, and if you're going to go into education, you have to take courses. You must take courses in every instrument.
The only one I didn't do well in was violin. When I went to my violin exam, the teacher looked at me, you would know her actually, Pat. Oh yeah, she retired. Oh, she retired. Well, my playing exam, she probably retired because of me, because I went in with my violin. And it's funny because both my kids now play string instruments, and I cranked my way through it because it was so different from wind instruments that I'd ever played. And she sat very politely, and then she looked at me and she said, "Are you ever going to teach violin?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Okay, we'll call that a B minus." And she passed me, and it was fine, but she clearly was not impressed. But everything else,
She's very kind.
but she was very forgiving.
Yeah.
She was very forgiving.